It's commonly understood that narcissists create an idealization phase. But what I want to propose is that it's actually not the narcissist that creates the idealization, it's the other person. You see, the other person is attempting, within a vicious circle, to aspire towards a reality where they're good enough, where they're healed, where they're fixed. Coming from an environment where love was not consistent, it was conditioned. The codependent type person develops strategies and patterns of behavior to make the other person happy so that the other person will reflect back positive sentiments that will then allow for the experience of love and wholeness and togetherness and stability to arise within the experience of that person. And so that when you engage a narcissist, it is your love externalization that they mirror back to you. And then they arrest your vicious circles and you feel complete, you feel known, you feel love. And see, you have to create an alternate cognitive dissonance future to overcome the perils of your own vicious circles where you have failed repeatedly to maintain yourself as good enough, to maintain a solid sense of confidence in yourself, where you are trying to overcome the failure of your childhood, in a sense, a continuation of your childhood where you are aspiring to heal yourself, fix yourself, and become sustainable in a state of happiness where you feel whole and complete. And so you idealize the narcissist into a soulmate because of their ability to mirror you. You see, because your default is not being good enough, you feel undeserving of love without being afforded the opportunity to demonstrate your worthiness, to project yourself as good enough and get that as feedback. And in that context, you will find ordinary, healthy people boring. You will wonder why this person checks out on all these areas, but I don't find myself in love with them. It's because in a state of being not good enough, an all-pervasive sense of brokenness, you are unable to feel self-love. You are not able to experience the love that may be present and coming from them because you need an exaggerated expression of love to help you overcome your own sense of being not good enough. And your sense of being not good enough needs to be overcome on the merits of your external behaviors that affect the other person. And what you're doing in the relationship with the narcissist is you're trying to preserve them as an ideal. You're trying to keep them regulated. You're trying to be good enough because every time they slip up and devalue you, you don't feel good enough or wanted anymore. You feel insecure in that relationship. And so while you were super elated to meet this soulmate and finally get them, the real work begins because now your effort is to preserve the positive feedback. You're trying to keep them in a state of happiness. You're trying to fix them because you experience a dependency upon the happiness of others for yourself to feel wanted, complete, and secure in the relationship. And so when they start to devalue you, you start to feel super insecure and you go right to work to fix that. In a sense, you have basically taken the dysregulated parental figure that you have failed to fix perpetually, that you can fix them intermittently, that you could make mom happy temporarily, but then they would dysregulate again and devalue you and judge you. And so your experience with love is a yo-yo of insecurity and instability. And so the narcissist is just a vessel for you to attempt to fix yourself. And your cognitive dissonance is generated because this ideal version of themselves is incongruent with reality. You create the fantasy that you share with the narcissist, and they merely mirror you. And so the idealization phase is actually orchestrated by not the narcissist, but the other person. And then the devaluation is when that fantasy starts to be broken apart by the pathological and inescapable nature of narcissistic behaviors. where you fail to meet their ideal, they devalue you, and now you try to restore them back to their idealized imaginary version that you've created as this soulmate inside of your own imagination, and also being a victim to the fact that you feel like they deceived you when all they did was actually mirror you. Take a look. And so what there is the cognitive dissonance requires the dismissal of all. And so you're stuck with an ideal version of love that requires a soulmate. You have a fantasy construct of love because you've observed your own instability, that your dependence upon the feedback of other people is what keeps you secure. That's what happened in your childhood. That your mother's love or your parents' love was not unconditional, that it required you to be a people pleaser. That in order to get love, you had to do things to demonstrate that you were good enough. And in a sense, you have not actually completed growing up. That your attachment style to people in love relationships is so profound because it's a replication of the type of attachments that a child would need to have with the dysregulated and inconsistently loving parental figure. And so you're still trying to grow up. And that absent this feedback from other people in your life, you feel not good enough, you feel broken, you feel small, you feel a measure of helplessness. And so you become dependent upon that love. And in order for you to aspire towards perfect stability, in recognition of your dependence on others on some level, whether totally conscious or subconscious, you have to idealize people. You have to perfectly idealize this narcissist, and you're trying to force them to become perfect. You're trying to deal with them because you depend on them maintaining themselves in the manner in which you first created them in your imagination during love bombing. And so when they act out and become narcissistic, just like your parents did, what you do is you internalize that. Because the only hope that you have of ever being whole and complete in your life is right here in front of you. That you have to fix your mom, you have to fix your dad, you have to fix the narcissist to restore them to happiness so that then you can feel whole, complete, confident, perfect, and blissful and secure. And so you're desperately holding on to this relationship. Well, now they're devaluing you, and those lower energy states are not meeting their ideals either. And when you're in that lower energy state, they continue to devalue you because you're not providing narcissistic supply like you used to. And so you are trading supply for security. You are trading supply for a positive reflection of yourself that seems to fix you in your life in totality. Because the way you experience yourself in this relationship also is the way you experience yourself generally. And that's why when you get devalued and fully discarded, you get thrown into an abandonment state. You get thrown into a state where the narcissist is just like one of your parental figures and you feel abandoned and left and you're worried about the next supply and you're jealous because this person in your occurrence of reality became the basis of the way that you experience yourself as whole and complete. And so you're left in a dark reality that echoes you're not good enough because as somebody that had inconsistent love in your childhood, you have lost the ability to experience yourself as whole and good enough and adequate for life without the consistent feedback of life that you need to aspire towards good enough at work. You need external evidence that you are good enough. And so as you try to recover, you're trying to fix yourself. You're trying to convince yourself. You're trying to talk to people. You need people to tell you are good enough. You are good enough. You start trying to tell yourself that. You start trying to break your life down and find reasons to believe outside of yourself that you are good enough. When in reality, it's time to recognize that you were never not good enough, that you will never find fulfillment in trying to be good enough. And your experience of love, it's always been within you, not outside there, not in the world, not from your mom, not from your dad. So it is important that you forgive yourself. It is important that you forgive your parents. It is important that you go back and take yourself to the very moments of life where you first told yourself you were not good enough, and you sentence yourself to a life of experiencing yourself only as merely adequate and good enough in the gaze of other people. You are recreating your childhood. and projecting that onto a narcissist. And it requires a full idealization of them so that you can have hope of fixing yourself.